Arnab, you've got a report that you've presented earlier this week
Right.
here at COP17,
Right.
which is talking about, well, you tell me, what's the report
Yes.
about?
Well, the presentation was on something called the financial gradients. This is essentially a financial mechanism for financing, not funding, but financing climate or sustainable development action. So long, what we have seen in most COPs is that it is getting funded, or the general notion about climate finance is how to get funding. But in this particular paper, what we are talking about is that around 80% of the climate being financed, or climate action being financed, is investment grade. That means it looks at around debt, equity, etc. So plus also at the entrepreneurial stage, you want to get a business model which gives you a reasonable rate of return. So financial gradients is a method in financial theory which allows you to essentially get climate action or sustainable development action as investment grade. Yeah.
Give me an example of where financing has been beneficial over funding, a particular project.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there are certain renewable energy or energy access projects which uses renewable energy. For example, in Terry, we have a Light a Billion Lives campaign. And there we have seen, and there are other examples as well, where funding is normally there for 3 to 5 years. So there's only short-term funding. But for such projects, you require financial flows, which should be for around 20 to 25 years. So it's much more long-term in nature. So if we are getting grant-based, then you don't have a long enough time horizon. So to increase the time horizon, it is imperative to think about business and financial models which bring you the money. Grant-based or just funding-based financing mechanisms will not be for long haul. It has to become investment grade.
And what are the advantages for potential investors in providing this financing?
Absolutely. First is the financial gradients is an approach to analyze the financial performance of a sustainable development or climate action program. Second thing is it's a tool by which potentially volatile sources of finance, are termed into stable long-term sources of finance. So volatile sources get converted into stable long-term sources of finance. And third, financial gradients is a strategy by which you can make or create a business model for sustainable development or climate action. So these are the advantages when you have financial gradients as an approach.
And looking at it from the other side of the perspective, what are the benefits for the recipients of this financing?
Yes. For example, in renewable access, if you are essentially making a village entrepreneur, that entrepreneur has to get some kind of return on the money he has invested in the project. So you're essentially making a program which has a business model for the entrepreneur as well. So, for example, this energy access project using renewable energy started off with 100% grant driven, but grant money was not there continuously, and in the scale of operations there is not enough grants. So for 20 villages you might have enough grants, but when you're scaling up to 1,000, 10,000 villages, you won't have enough grants. That's where you have to look at other sources of finance which require rates of return. So that's where financial gradients come in.
Right. I'm trying to see it from the perspective of perhaps the poor rural farmer,
Yes.
Who has been given funding perhaps over many years, been given grants.
Yes.
What is the difference for that poor rural farmer receiving financing as opposed to funding?
Yes.
From his own pride.
Absolutely.
His own pride.
Absolutely. This is a very good question, and I'll answer in this fashion. If you look at it, grant money is actually pretty expensive. Equity, which requires a rate of return, is not expensive. And why do I say this? I say this because grants do not have very stringent monitoring requirements. Therefore, a person who's receiving grants has to figure out the monitoring mechanism for that program himself or herself. And sometimes it is very inefficiently done, and the and the project or program fails to deliver. So when the project or program fails to deliver after 3 to 4 years, how would you continue that project? So for the village level, you want the project to be running. So a project to be running, it should be financially viable. And also there is this debate which is continuing over here, which is that you want to create village level entrepreneurs. So you have to create programs which have rates of return calculated for the village entrepreneur. And the only way you can sustain a program is when you have investment grade money. So after 3 years, if you want to continue the program for the next 20 years, you have to figure out investment money.